Welcome everyone to the latest Telemedia vodcast with me, Jarvis Todd, editor of Telemedia magazine, and Paul Skeldon, the expert, the wordsmith, the editor-in-chief, the guy who fills telemediamagazine.com with all the useful information, all the information you need to run a successful telemedia business. This is where we take a quick run through of a couple of the key issues and stories that have come across Paul's desk over the last couple of weeks. If you're a regular viewer to our vodcast, you'll know that we've recently been talking a lot about some of the changing payment landscape, the issues within the landscape, things like the tightening of compliance with MasterCard and Visa, A2A payments, single click, all the other things that are coming into the sort of payment mix for any telemedia acquirer, merchant advertiser, alongside, our old favorite DCB. So this particular episode, we're going to be sort of bringing all that together and talking about sort of more than payments, why the telemedia industry needs to take a much broader view of this really important area. I think for years the telemedia industry has viewed payments as a sort of choice of rails, but changing consumer behaviours and stricter card rules means that really that mindset is a bit too narrow. There is a story to hang this off, and again, I'd urge you to reference some of our previous podcasts. The first one being consumer payment predictions, agentic commerce, bank-backed wallets, and click to pay. Really summarizing the fact that consumers expect multiple payment experiences, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we discussed in a previous podcast the other day, Juniper Research has done I guess, has pulled together all its knowledge about the payments market and sort of looked at the trends that are happening there. And it's quite interesting that it's becoming more about things like agentic commerce, where AI does the paying for you, and wallets are becoming increasingly popular. And that's a global thing. It's even happening in Europe, which is a lot of the time we talk about these things and they're in more developing markets. This is something that's happening globally. Wallets are important. Account to account payments is click to pay sort of things where it just comes straight out of your bank account. All of that is happening all at once. And we're also seeing, as we discussed in another of our earlier podcasts, about sort of how card payments, MasterCard and Visa, have changed their sort of rules on how they police things like fraud and chargebacks and all that kind of thing. Not necessarily making credit cards more difficult to use, but certainly putting the emphasis back on the merchant acquirers as to sort of monitoring what's going on, because they now have a much shorter time frame to react if fraud looks like it's happening or something dodgy is going on. So I think these two things together, what it sort of shows is that, one, cards are really popular and important and are growing in use among the telemedia community, but equally, because of these changing rules, it might make it slightly harder, slightly more onerous, that maybe these other payment tools, wallets particularly, but also account to account payments and carrier billing, are all possibly going to see the benefit of that by, being sort of pushed as the sort of preferred payment mechanism, certainly by the merchants, because they then don't have to have such a big worry about fraud and chargebacks and those things. Not that it goes away, but it's an interesting time. I think we're going to see a rise in payments generally, because I think more and more people are using these services, but how they pay is going to be much more fluid.
I mean, just to be clear in my own mind about sort of the flows of an A2A a mechanism, and I just, for those that probably maybe don't know, if, for example, had a digital content subscription that was about to expire, the platform would send a renewal prompt to me. So let's say your sports pass expires today, renew instantly with using the Pix Brazilian example, which is an A2A.
Mm.
And the user says, you've got no card details, no expiry date, you don't know CVV number. And so there's no card decline issues there. Then Pix triggers a bank-to-bank transfer. The user's banking app opens automatically. They confirm with a fingerprint. The money moves instantly from their bank to the merchant account, and access is restored immediately. And the telemedia platform receives real-time confirmation, unlocks the next day of streaming or whatever that subscription service might be. I mean, utterly seamless.
Mm.
I mean, obviously, it's not going to work in Africa where you don't have a bank account, but where you have banking apps, I mean, that
Yeah.
to me is, super smart. We mentioned before that again. It's cheap as well. There's not nowhere near the margins on that. I got, when I sort of thought about that, I was thinking, this is a really exciting kind of mechanism that um, parks the credit card issue that we talked about earlier. Although, it's important that compliance is still at the forefront of your services. Um, but in those markets where your customers by and large do have banking apps, I mean, this is a killer app, right? I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of yeah, it's much more seamless. It's kind of like, it's the way like most people increasingly want to pay, particularly
Yeah,
younger people. They live in a Monzo world where this sort of thing is kind of, much more kind of likely to be how they pay for everything. Why would it
exactly.
be
Yeah.
any different for a sort of sports subscription? I think the sort of the other side of this, though, is that it takes you into the realms of having to sort of be policed to some degree by banking regulations and finance regulations and those kind of things have never really sort of been applied in quite the same way to carrier billing. I mean, obviously, there's a whole load of other regulations to do with communications around that, but I think there is that side of it. I think also
But
like
they can't be worse. They can't be
they
worse
can't be
than
worse. No,
MNO regulations
no, but you might find yourself in the position where you're having to sort of like satisfy the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK as well as the sort of Ofcom, because you're offering carrier billing and you're offering a wallet payment and you're offering sort of click to pay, account to account stuff. So it might put a bigger regulatory burden on people, but I think from a customer point of view, it makes it much more seamless. I think the big problem with any payments is nothing to do with technology, it's to do with fraud, and there's always going to be people trying to fraud, defraud these systems, and I don't know off the top of my head how vulnerable account to account payments are to fraud compared to other ways of paying. I suspect, like anything, AI.
the fingerprint helps though, right?
Well, you'd think like the biometrics would help, yes. I mean, certainly for I think one of the things that a lot of businesses are worried about a fake AI created buyers who buy something and then immediately charge it back, and they're sucking money out of the system. It's that sort of thing. Plus fake merchants charging people for things, all that kind of stuff. And I guess that doesn't really matter what the payment mechanism is. That's just going to happen anyway. So fraud policing becomes different. But yeah, these things make it all so much easier to do and so much easier then to
Yeah.
sell as a service to people.
Yeah. And just when you didn't think that there was enough payment mechanisms emerging,
Yeah.
it turns out that Europe is preparing something big as well. And again, this story can be found on telemediamagazine.com. The digital euro,
Yeah, I threw this
potential
in
new
because
rail.
it just threw this in because it's fat. Yeah, I hadn't really heard of it. I think I'd heard of it being talked about, but suddenly they're now talking more seriously about it. It's about a proposed electronic form of cash.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's the euro, but for making much easier payments online for things. But it
Yeah,
seems to be very unclear as to sort of like where that's going to go. And with all things sort of EU, they don't seem to be able to agree on it currently.
well, the nuggets were a new regulated payment rail for across Europe. Potential impact on DCB would be the fees and access, and I can talk about that a little. Well, the fees being low and access being broad, and instant low friction payments for digital content along the lines that we've just mentioned. So,
Yeah.
if this does manage to get itself off the ground, and it does feel like this is the natural sort of direction of travel when it comes to money and payments, doesn't it? For my money, I think this is something that is well worth keeping an eye on over the. Well, I'm sure we'll all hear about it. You probably don't need to keep an eye on it. But again, I mean, if it works and it's got
Mm.
some of the benefits we talked about earlier, again, that could be a real shot in the arm for the telemedia industry across Europe, which is kind of considered to be, mature,
Yeah.
maybe not such an exciting market as, say, Middle East or Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia and South America, as everyone's sort of expanding out. But the European market's been sort of reasonably static, and I guess. I'm hoping to see something along these lines, hitting the market soon. But I mean, again, the most important thing for people to know out there is that if this does become something that you need to know about if you're an acquirer or a merchant, then it will be covered in Marbella. Maybe not this one, but certainly Marbella in the future, which, if you don't know, is our flagship telemedia event of the year. And it's going to be held in Marbella on the 4th to the 6th of October. Go to w2event.com for more information. We've got very few stands left. We've also got a couple of sponsorships available. And you should sign up and make a date in your calendar, because certainly the key decision makers, it's certainly the highest concentration of key decision makers in the telemedia industry worldwide, will be in Marbella during those dates. So we would hope to see you there, and hopefully take these conversations forward across the conference schedule, which is currently under construction. So, Paul, you got anything else to add about
Well, no,
this
I was just going to say I will be throwing the digital euro into the discussions in Marbella, because I think it's a fascinating thing. It could be brilliant, but yeah, like I say, there's a lot of toing and froing about how it might actually work, and it may be many years before it comes to fruition. But it could be a real game changer for the European telemedia market. So yeah,
well,
be interested to see.
the great thing about that is that thankfully there'll be some people that are actually in the euro from the European market. Sadly,
Yes.
that doesn't apply to us at this stage. But anyway, so it'd be nice to hear their views, because I'm sure they're a little bit close to the mothership on that. And we'll have some good insight and views, and probably be able to shed a bit more light on it than we've just been able to. But either way, I hope you've enjoyed this quick run through of a couple of the stories that we thought were interesting. The message is payment landscape is changing fast. We'll keep you up to date with those changes, and we hope to see you back here again soon for our next podcast, which will be in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, happy telemediaing. See you
Yep.
later.
Happy telemediaing. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.